The next aspect of organizational information systems is a concept called functional area information systems. Sometimes we'll see this as FAIS. Functional area information systems. So when you think about each organizational function, you have things like accounting, and you have HR, you have procurement, which could be part of accounting. You have marketing. There can be logistics, supply chain management, warehouse management. Each of those functional areas can very often have their own data. And so we often will call these things siloed data. And so you think about this, if you have your own little silo, right? So this could be accounting. And so accounting has their data. And then maybe in another silo, we could have marketing. And then perhaps in another silo, we could have management. So a lot of organizations, as they've grown up over time, what they've had is these different siloed information systems. Now the problem with this is that when accounting makes changes here, it doesn't necessarily get reflected here or here. And so often what we see is, oh, okay, so accounting then has their system, they do their work, and then they actually have to transfer over into, let's say, marketing, or transfer over into management. And so it's really inefficient. And what would be ideal then is that if instead of having all of these separate siloed data, if what we could do is create a single data source that accounting, HR, management, supply chain, they all had access. This would be ideal, because then when accounting makes some changes, that data, right, this is just the whole data system, would get reflected into every other functional area. And so each functional area has certain responsibilities, certain objectives, and yet it would be nice if all of the data could be shared in one location. And in fact, what we've done now is we've been moving in organizations into this type of form, and we see it, and it's called ERP systems. ERP, which stands for Enterprise Resource Planning. Enterprise Resource Planning Systems. Now the beauty of this is that, again, everybody gets to share the massive data source. Each functional area will have certain rights and privileges. So don't think that simply because all the data is being shared in one place that everybody has full access. Right? The system will be able to, based upon authenticating who the appropriate users are, authorizing them with the appropriate and necessary rights and privileges to manipulate, to view. So here at our university, for example, we have data that shouldn't be shared. So financial aid data should not necessarily be viewed by accounting. Now, the data are related, but there are certain rights and privileges that accounting does or doesn't need to see within the financial aid. And in the same way, I'm given enough of a view of my students' data so that I can actually serve as an instructor. I don't need to see my students' financial aid information. I don't need to see their demographics. All I need to know is the necessary data so that I can serve them as their instructor. So the ERP system moves from the siloed into the shared data source where each functional area can still actually achieve their goals. Okay, so as we think about this, there are some, within the ERP system, Well, I suppose I should give you a little history. So first of all, where it started was in manufacturing, we had this thing called MRP. MRP was Material Requirements Planning. Material Requirements Planning. And so you think about this. If you had some type of shop or a machine floor, and you've got a station, and it's doing something. Perhaps what this station is doing is cutting lumber. And so the lumber, this flows out of the station. But to flow into the station, we would need, let's say, large sheets. And so you would have your materials that would come into the station so it could do whatever it needs to do, and then coming out of the station would be its end product. The Material Requirements Planning System would help to make sure that the right materials were coming into the station at the time that they needed it. And so for many who are supply chain oriented, we talk about this in terms of like just in time. Just in time. So get that material at the right station just at the right time so that you don't have a whole bunch of material that's basically backing up. So that was MRP. And then they said, then the people that did MRP said, this is really good. It would be nice if instead of just scheduling the materials, we started thinking about like costing, and we started doing some more forecasting and some other types of functions. And so we came up with this thing called MRP2. MRP2 was, instead of being materials resource planning, material requirements planning, it was manufacturing resource planning. And so it was everything that MRP did, but we've added now some other functions like costing, forecasting, etc. And then we thought, hey, this is a really good idea, and this then became ERP. And in ERP, we added even more modules. We said, hey, why even focus just on manufacturing? We can actually expand this to other types of businesses. And so now ERP is made up of a set of modules, and you can actually choose which modules you're going to want to have with your organization or not. So if you've got a company that actually doesn't do any manufacturing, you would not include any of the manufacturing type modules. You might have a service-oriented model company. You might have a restaurant. Or in our case, we've got an education system. And so our university is in the process now of adopting an ERP system. Well, if you think about what a university actually produces instead of, let's say, a traditional company, you'd say, well, those are two very distinct organizations. So the modules that we would use in our ERP might be different than the modules IBM might use, or the module that Walmart might use, or even Amazon. So some ideal modules in an ERP system, right? These are the ideal ERP system. Okay, so these are some of the very common modules you'll find in ERP systems. You'll find manufacturing. Manufacturing is going to have like the engineering, the capacity, the workflow, etc. Another very common one, financials. Financials. And that would be, I know it's hard to read, financials. Accounting, you would have accounts payable, accounts receivable, etc. Another one, HR. Supply chain management. Supply chain management is going to have inventory, warehouse management, logistics, shipping, etc. Another is projects. And projects will have things like your activities management, your time, expense, project costing, even project billing. So if your organization, or if your company was doing, let's say, construction, and so for every construction job you actually have to create a bid, projects would handle much of that. A very, very important one, and actually so important we're actually going to talk about this as a completely separate module, is customer relationship management. Customer relationship management. And this is what makes big companies feel like small companies. That we pay attention to who our customers are and how we manage the relationship with them. Then the last one that I'm going to put here is data warehousing or data analytics. And the data warehouse lets us actually store the data, but not in the transactional processing format, but actually this is for analytics. This will help us to discover patterns, discover relationships. And so it's an analytic component of an ERP system. And so these are the modules. Now there are other modules, but these are the very common modules that you'll find in most ERP systems. Now there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of different ERP systems that exist. Some very, very common ones, the ones that actually take up the majority of the market space, the top would be SAP. SAP is one of the big enterprise systems. Another one is Oracle. So Oracle actually purchased an SAP or an ERP system and then enveloped them into their own system. And then a third big one is Microsoft. So Microsoft also did the same thing that Oracle did. There was a system, an accounting package called General Dynamics, or maybe it was just Dynamics. And Microsoft liked it and purchased that entire suite and then expanded that to become more of an entire ERP system. And so these three are some of the very larger. You'll also find that there are many homegrown systems, straight customized systems, and so you'll find that as you look, there's really many different providers of ERP systems.